This is an argument as old as time. When Barbara and I first started our careers, I think the same discussion was ongoing. And that's not to say that there's certainly a consensus within the legal community that you need to be very clear. If your expectation is the group's expectation is they only want to pay profit, then there needs to have been a discussion about it, and it needs to be clear in the contract. If the facility, the hotel, is wanting their cancellation fees or attrition based on room revenue, or F&B minimum, that would be gross numbers, and that needs to be very clear. I will say that most of the discussions are dictated by the client. Standard forms don't tend to address profit. And Barbara, I'm sure, has negotiated that many times. I personally believe that attrition is at revenue, and cancellation fees, there would be some negotiation potentially to determine profit. But I also think when push comes to shove, and the lawsuits that I've handled that were based on gross, when you have when you have a declining scale, as long as you've got that factored in to your scale numbers, then you're fine with gross numbers. So it just depends on how the contract is structured. I personally will tell you that the hotels are never made whole at profit in a cancellation clause. Never. Because of how groups tend to negotiate them.
Yeah, it's interesting. And many of you have heard me say over the years, don't call it profit, right? Call it Fred, call it something else, because it doesn't matter. None of us know what a profit is on any given night. We know that they change, right? We might know ranges. I think going into negotiation, kind of guns a-blazing, right, saying, want to use profit. I think the better approach is just to say, we want to use some amount that's off the revenue rate, right, off the total rate, and make a proposal. I think that's sort of the first piece. But to Kelly's earlier point, be as clear as possible. Remember, for example, when we're talking about attrition, this is a formula that can govern if and when we don't have the pickup that we need. So we got to be careful about the formula. One thing I see, even a bigger issue, I would say, when I'm seeing in attrition fees, nightly versus cumulative. So again, that one word, watching out for that. Revenue versus room count. Again, both can be done, but you got to do them right. And terms in a contract which are confirmed or set versus static terms. So for example, is it 80% of the total room nights? Or is it 100 rooms, so 80 rooms is 80%, and we use the exact number? The reason I bring that up is that many of you, if you do adjust your room block later, there might be a dispute over what those numbers look like. And what I see a lot is in the cancellation fee section. When the math is done, say it's based on a certain percentage, and there's a dollar amount in there. If that block gets modified, whether that dollar amount will change or not has been a source of a lot of disputes for groups. So I don't like, I like one or the other. And honestly, I think my preference nowadays is to go with the so-called percentage approach, so that if the block changes, you'll be able to change with it. You won't have to go back and redo all that. So I think that's definitely a big consideration. To Kelly's last point, I'll say when it comes to that sliding scale on cancellation fees, just making sure that 100% of total room revenue and total food and beverage revenue is likely not enforceable, because it gives the hotel more than it would receive had it performed the contract. So to Kelly's point, factoring in some amount of offset is in order, is something I would advocate. And last point on this cancellation, watch out for mutual cancellation fee clauses, because everything we just said, Kelly said about cancellation fees, it has to apply in both directions. And that's a really difficult thing to do when the numbers don't necessarily line up. So a lot of issues here, Kelly. I know you've mentioned, we've talked about this over the years of just that, as you said, tales old as time, of these issues constantly evolving.
So I want to add 2 cents on the cancellation. don't ever have a mutual cancellation clause where the hotel pays the same amount that the group pays in the virtue of cancellation. It's apples to oranges. It's a giant mess. It will not hold up in court for the hotel to be paying the same amount, I believe, that the group was ordered to pay. And last, when you're talking about 100%, so there's always going to be some variation on 100%, but particularly on F&B. If you're within a 14-day window, many hotels, if you're not obligated to pay 100% and you cancel within a 14-day window after the staff has already been scheduled and the food has already been ordered, then the hotel truly can enforce 100% cancellation, because they're going to be out of pocket all of that because they have to pay the labor and they've already out the food, and maybe they can resell some of it, but reselling a whole banquet's worth of food is really challenging.